last debate tournament of this semester. It's good to see so many of you out here interested in debate, competing in this. Some of you, I know it's the first time to come to a debate tournament. This is a great tournament to come to. We have a couple real good speakers to kind of get this tournament started off proper. They have a lot of information. They both have debate experience and are going to share some of that about how debate helps you not just to win debate rounds at high school debate tournaments, but also to take that and apply it to the rest of your life so that you get something really tangible and good out of this experience. I'm going to have somebody that most of you know. He's a board member with the Houston Urban Debate League. He comes to a lot of the events and cares a lot about this operation. So please welcome Mr. Charlie Chafer to the stage.
Hi guys. Thanks for showing up to another HUDL tournament, and we're excited about you guys being here today. This tournament is named the Brett Elliott Memorial Tournament, and it's the third year that we've had this tournament. For those of you that have come to the previous ones, you know that Brett was a good friend of Tom and I's, good friend of debate, just a good friend who was violently killed about 4 years ago. And I wear his wristband that I put on at the funeral today every day as a reminder that there's often good that comes out of even the worst tragedies. And one of the good things that has come out of Brett's loss was getting some of his friends together, including Tom, to sponsor this debate tournament. You all come to these tournaments, and I know you know that we put a lot of work into it and that HISD is a big supporter, but it's also the case that without the Urban Debate League and without contributors of time, energy, vision, and money, we wouldn't have a lot of these events, and we certainly wouldn't have things like our summer debate camp that many of you guys took advantage of. So I wanted to say the word Brett Elliott. Brett, buddy, we're with you here. We're happy to convene in his name, and I wanted to start out by saying that. The other thing I want to do today is introduce to you my friend Tom Rollins. And before I get into his introduction, which is I would say probably the best proof that debate can take you anywhere, because Tom happens to have done everything, and I think will tell you why debate is important. I wanted to once again tell you that one of the things that we do is we try to bring here at Houston Urban Debate League. If you were at the Summer Institute, you were interrupted, but no. If you were at our Summer Institute, you were able to go for a day to the James Baker Public Policy Institute, and we got 3 astronauts and several other space luminaries to come and talk to you about space and space policy and how the topic you guys are debating this whole year might be really relevant, could be really relevant to your future. Speaking as someone who just came from Cape Canaveral yesterday looking at a launch pad for a rocket that I'm building, I know that space personally led me to a career where I'm able to do exactly what I want to do, which is run a commercial space company. Throughout all of our speakers, every time we bring people to you, Tom, as I said, personifies this, you're going to see, oh, debate was the key. Debate was the beginning thing that allowed others to get to the path that they wanted to do. It gives you great freedom. Through debate, you can do anything you want to. So that's the end of this speech. You'll hear it again from me later in the year. We're just so very pleased that Tom Rollins made another Herculean effort to come down here from Washington, D.C. He's a native Houstonian, so he doesn't mind coming back too often. But he came down specifically for today, specifically to talk to you about debate. And I want to tell you a little bit about Tom. He debated here at Westchester High School, and he won 50% of the tournaments that he attended in his junior and senior years in high school. Okay, so you go to 10 tournaments. Tom took 5 of them. The rest of the city had to battle for the other 5 during the year. He won the high school national championship in extent. In college, he debated along with several of us great debaters at Georgetown University, where, you know, he took a step back. He only won 40% of the tournaments that he attended. Think about that. College debate is really hard. It's not an easy thing to do. You have guys like Treasury Secretary Larry Summers or 9/11 Commission Secretary Phil Zelikow, highly motivated, really good speakers spending their entire lives thinking about how do you win debate tournaments. Well, again, all right, we had 10 tournaments. Tom took 4 of them, 6 left for everybody else. Pretty impressive. He was top speaker at the national tournament twice and second once. No one's ever done that. It was a good debate, let's put it that way. He graduated with high honors from Harvard Law School. He went on to be a law clerk. He practiced law in Houston. And then he took the job of Chief of Staff and Chief Counsel for the U.S. Senate Labor and Human Resources Committee under Chairman Edward Ted Kennedy. And again, Tom will tell you, and feel free to ask him about his experiences there, where hiring debaters was one of his main goals to help craft the legislation in health and human services and resources that we have today. He got tired of the government world and in 1989 founded the Teaching Company, which the Wall Street Journal described as the colossus of its field and a serious force in adult education. So here we go, lawyer, debater, analyst, and staff leader at the Senate, but also successful entrepreneur. He's been a debate coach. His debaters have won the Virginia State Lincoln Douglas tournament twice. And just because he doesn't have anything better to do in his free time, he became a nationally recognized weightlifter and is on his road to becoming a nationally recognized member of the shotgun sports, having won the Class A World Championship in the international version of that sport this April. So, Tom's here. Now, you know, he's a real human being. It's not, you know, that's a pretty impressive resume. But I'm going to let him now speak to you and tell you about why what you're doing, what you're spending your time, or for those of you who haven't debated yet, what y'all are thinking about are going, what is this debate? You know, you'll hear it from Tom. So without any more, it's really my pleasure to introduce my friend Tom Rollins.
Howdy. I came here to talk to you in part because this is what I was doing when I was in high school, debating at Houston high school debate tournaments, and it feels very good to be back at one again. My last formal debate was in 1979, 32 years ago, before most of your parents met each other. The reason I'm here today is to share with you what I've learned in the last 3 decades after debate about the value of debate in the real world. And I'm going to advance a single primary radical claim to you this afternoon. And that is that debate can be valuable to you every day of your life after you're done debating. It can make you wealthy. It can make you powerful. But you must do debate in the way that I will describe it for you in a minute. When I say do debate, I want to give you some clarity about what debate is and what I think it is not. So first, a little clarity about what debate is. Debate is a way of thinking and deciding. Debate is a way of thinking and deciding. If you accept that that's what debate is about, and I'll give you reasons why it is not something else in a moment, then there are 4 key skills that you, as debaters, if you do it, if you throw yourselves into this activity, if you immerse yourself in debate, will acquire. These are the 4 skills. 1, the ability to identify conflicting choices between varied courses of action or belief. So, identify conflict. 2, research all competent views on those alternative choices. And I use the word competent because I know many of you have cards in there that come from somewhere in the blogosphere, from unidentified websites and so on and so forth, with no real person behind them of any weight. That will all become irrelevant once you're done with debate. Works in debate rounds sometimes, does not work in the real world. People want to know that what you're asking them to believe is based on fact or authority. 3rd, and this is key, to sift and sort through all of that research and organize it into what we would call, as debaters, blocks of argument. It does not do simply to gather hundreds of cards and walk into a room with them, any more than it is creating a building to have a bunch of sand and steel out in the middle of a field. It's not until you go through all of the evidence, sort it out, get rid of the weak cards, assemble them into groups where an argument can be made, a chain of arguments can be advanced, that you've then blocked the topic. And fourth and finally, final skill, is to collide and decide. And by that I mean you run those blocks of arguments into each other and see what wins. That's the essence of debate. That is the skill that you are acquiring, those 4 skills. Now, a little bit of clarity about what debate is not. Debate is not, and I say this particularly to the newbies who may be here and who may be watching some debates and will be shocked by the velocity with which debaters may conduct their arguments. Debate is not primarily a public speaking skill. Debate stopped being a public speaking sport about 50 years ago, and it transformed pretty quickly into a thinking sport. Charlie and I had the good fortune to be coached by one of the people who was behind that initial movement, James Unger, who was the coach at Georgetown University when Charlie and I debated. And the stories about what it was like when Jim first came up in college debate and would put a stack of 90 index cards, yeah, you still call them cards, back then they were index cards, and start going through those as he delivered his arguments rapidly. People had not seen that before. Back then it was careful oratory, well-rounded phrases, and so on and so forth, the sort of nonsense that we all laugh at now when we see it done in what is supposed to be a debate round. Now, some people are concerned about this. Public speakers, in general, don't speak 300 words a minute, and adults who try to propagate the activity of debate are often worried about whether or not we aren't in fact ruining you in some way by teaching you to speak quickly rather than more slowly and oratorically. I have a couple of answers for that concern, having been in the real world as a debater. One, if you can teach a kid to be fluent at 300 words a minute, it's nothing to teach them to be fluent at 120 words a minute, which is a normal conversational rate of speed. It's just that debaters, once they leave debate, must learn to slow down. Two, speeches of an oratorical style are really rare and unusual, in fact, weird and freaky. President Obama is one of the most effective communicators I've seen in a long time. He almost never does what I would call oratory. Listen to him next time he's on television. His style is conversational, not wholly unlike what I'm doing right now. He doesn't orate. What would it be like if you went into a room, or say, you know, Charlie introduced me, I came up before you, and this happened instead. I am reminded of the words of William Butler Yeats, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. What do you do when that happens? See those exit signs? You get through them as fast as you can. There's a whack job in the building. You need to escape. Oratory is strange. Conversational communication is not. And debate fully enables you to do that. I mean, has anybody here been to a round of dramatic interpretation? Yeah. Okay. Where in the rule book for dramatic interp does it say, please identify a dramatic interpretation that you can do on the worst possible thing that could happen to a human being, and then emote about it for 8 to 10 minutes with a memorized speech? I've judged rounds of this. Oh, the first person is impersonating a girl who's been raped repeatedly by Nazis. The second person is impersonating a person whose little brother was murdered in front of them. I mean, you watch these, and some of the performances are fantastic, but you want to go take a shower as soon as you get out of the room. And you want to get all the kids into therapy, right? It's a weird sport. Nobody does that in the real world. The other thing that debate is not in the real world, and I'm going to break a few hearts with this one. For the newbies, you don't know what a critique or a K is, but critiques and Ks do not happen in the real world. A critique, just briefly, is an argument that argument itself is pointless or worthless, or that the entire value construct of Western civilization is silly or should be ignored, or is in fact evil and we should undermine it as quickly and ably as we can. This doesn't happen in the real world. I'm going to give you 2 instances of proof. One, the healthcare debate. Okay? It was a couple years ago. Except for the Vietnam War, I don't think the country debated an issue of public policy more thoroughly than this country debated health care reform about 2 years ago prior to the passage of Obamacare. The president, every senator, every congressman, every possible cable commentator, expert, and so on and so forth, everyone's on TV, everyone's in the blogosphere, everybody's in the newspapers debating this issue. Widely, widely debated. Not one person, not one, ever reached for the Nietzsche K to say that by trying to avoid death through health care, we are refusing to embrace our own inevitable mortality and thereby denying the facticity of our destiny. What would you do if a person made that argument? You'd run for the exits, right? Whack job. Doesn't happen in debate rounds, though. You might consider it. Another example, the failing economy. Everybody knows the DDEV K. We should eliminate economic development. In fact, it would be a good thing if we could make it go backwards. How come President Obama has never taken the presidential podium and said, you know what? Not only is unemployment a good thing, we're going to run it up like you've never seen before. We are going to completely undermine the American economy, destroy what we can of economic development, and all move into HUDs and get some real quality of life going again. Won't happen. Ks don't happen in the real world. Face it, in the real world, K is a baseball term, and it means strikeout. Give them up once you leave debate. I want to talk about debate in the real world in 4 places: the classroom, law, government, and business. I've lived all of these, and I'm going to pass on some advice that I've got for you coming from each of them. First, the classroom. The classroom. Debate? Yeah. Let me share with you a trick that I was taught by a senior debater, Jeff Ruck, at Georgetown University when I was a freshman at Georgetown. Scared to death. It was the end of multiple choice exams, end of fill in the blank. Everything was essay exams. How do you get ready for an essay exam? And Jeff said, well, it's just like debate. Here's what you do. You get yourself 10 sheets of paper. Go through the readings and the class notes, and yes, you must actually do the readings and go through the class notes to be good at this, quickly, looking for what you think are the 10 most obvious essay questions that would require you to understand what had been taught in the course. Write those questions on top of the 10 sheets of paper. Now, go back carefully through the readings and notes and block out the answers to all 10 of those questions based on what's in the readings of the notes. Oh yeah, and use cites too. As so-and-so wrote in this reading, bang. And so as you said in class on that day, bang. And then you've got 10 prepared answers. Let me give you the proof. In 4 years of college and 3 years of law school, only one time did I not have a canned answer ready on an essay question. Always guess what they were. Now, I had a bunch of questions I'd prepare for that weren't asked, but only one time did I not have a prepared answer, and I remember that question too. It was in a constitutional law class, and the question was, Freud says we are in this world to love and to work. Comment. Who briefs that one? I don't care what you read. Nobody would have been ready for that one. Second place you can use debate in the classroom is your classroom performance. Do not underestimate this. If you do really well when you speak in class, if you interact well with the teacher or professor will think better of your exams when it comes time to grade them, better of your papers when it comes time to review them. Let me tell you about the big difference a debater can make. What do most people do when they are about to make a comment in class? What goes on? I'll tell you what goes on. There's an empty head here, and an idea is flitting about the room. It lands in their head. The hand goes up. The teacher or professor calls on the hand, and they deliver whatever was this thing that popped into their head. It may not be well formed. It may not be coherent. It may not include complete sentences, but they're yakking away. I went to Harvard Law School, which prides itself in the use of the Socratic method, where through question and answer between teacher and student, truth, subtle and obvious, is revealed. I find the proposition largely to be nonsense. In the years that I went to law school, I think I heard 3 questions that actually did that. Most of the rest of the time, questions were either an inadvertent exhibition of ignorance or a deliberate, arrogant display of competence. I want you to fall in the latter category all the time, and here's how you do it. You're listening to a teacher make points in class. You have a thought, something you would like to share with the class. You do not raise your hand. You reach for your pen. and you outline what you're going to say or ask. 3 Roman numerals minimum. You can put subpoints under there if you want. Assume that you're working with a 30 to 90 second time limit. Now you've got it there, outlined, ready to go. You know exactly what you're going to say. Hand goes up, teacher calls, and you deliver your question or comment or answer. The teacher will love you. You are exhibiting that you care about the class, that you care enough about your fellow students to actually advance a decent point, to be clear about it, and so forth. People remember this kind of thing. I once gave an answer that went on for 4 minutes. Now, I got an ovation from the rest of the classroom for it because I was doing it on purpose to embarrass a really nasty professor, but it worked. This is an incredibly powerful technique. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. Mr. Rollins, we couldn't possibly do such a thing in class because then everybody else would think we were a nerd or a dork. Oh, I have a news flash for all of you. It is 3 minutes until 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You are at a high school debate tournament opening assembly. You crossed the bridge to Nerdville a long time ago. You were at the opening assembly of Dorktown. You got that right. And here's the good news that comes with the news flash. You know who rules the world? Nerds, not jocks. Nerds. You are in line to rule the world. What I was emphasizing to you about debate distinguishes 2 kinds of human being in the real world. There are 2. There are those who do what others decided, and there are those who decide what others will do. You want to be in the second group. This is where the power is. It's also where the fun is. I despise having to follow other people's rules. In fact, I've told a couple of my debaters, the way you advance in the world is that you start out and you do all kinds of things, like can you perform these algebra equations? Can you actually show up for work on time and do exactly as you're told, so on and so forth. You're being tested to see whether or not you can follow the rules. And if you're really, really good at following the rules, you know what they let you do? They'll let you start making rules. And then you know what your biggest problem is? Getting other people to follow them. But that's another story. Right now, I want you to understand that nerds have an enormous sway over this world. Now, I see a lot of guys out here, and so I want to speak to you, because I used to be a guy in high school, and I thought the world was ruled by jocks, okay? And in high school, to a certain extent, it's true. But let me tell you, it's about to end soon. Of the 250,000 American high school football players, how many of them do you think will ever make a single nickel playing football? The answer is 215. Of the 150,000 American high school basketball players, how many of them will make as much as 1 thin dime playing basketball? Oh, it's tougher there. The answer is 64. Your odds between the 2 sports are 1 in 2,000 of ever making a nickel. And by the way, you know, football careers particularly don't last very long in general. I think the average lifespan, or not lifespan, but career span of an NFL football player is roughly 3 years. There's not a lot of money in that, okay? Jock rule ends soon. And by the time you get to be my age and Charlie's, all the jocks are out getting their knees replaced. A very different outcome that they live with. All right. That's classroom performance. Let's talk about law. I'm going to be brief about this. The resemblance between law and debate is so close that it almost bears no discussion. Yep, they're 2 extremely well-prepared sides. There's an enormous emphasis on research and the distillation of that evidence, tremendous emphasis on care in its presentation, and there is a third-party judge who decides who's right and who's wrong. The analog is complete. Some 30% of college debaters go on to become lawyers. No surprise there. Third case I want to talk about, government. Government. I'm going to read you some cards. Brought some cards on this one. Tags, then evidence. Many debaters are in policy-making roles. 10% of debaters studied by Keel and Maitland in 1984 worked in the legislative or executive branches of government. Another survey showed that, get this, over 80% of all current members of Congress were on their school's forensics teams. Debaters excel at policy making. Professor Pollack summarizes his study. In speculating what role the forensic activity plays in the attainment of oral communication success in legislative halls, some positive conclusions can be inferred. For example, the correlation ran high in this survey that the very top debaters and floor speakers in the Florida House of Representatives were also those who had previous experience in scholastic debate or public speaking type forensic activity. And lastly, debate is the reason they excel. I'm going to read to you a card from 1960. This is a 50-year-old piece of evidence. One survey in 1960 of 160 senators, congressmen, Supreme Court justices, and members of the cabinet found that over 60% had debated in college, and that of those, 90% described their college debate experience as very helpful or invaluable in their careers. Now, I had the good fortune to work in the Senate, which, by the way, describes itself as the greatest debating body in the world, a conceit that I think is not entirely appropriate because I've seen better, but let's let them have that. I worked for one of the greatest legislators of all time, Senator Edward Kennedy of Massachusetts. It was my job for the years I worked for him to craft and to pass legislation having to do pretty much with anything concerning American domestic policy. Ours was one of 16 committees in the Senate. The entire legislative scope of the United States is defined by those 16 committees. Ours included an enormous amount of all of American domestic policy. It became clear as I sort of looked around the job, came to understand what it meant, the debate was a perfect analog for what we were going to do. Writing legislation is exactly the same as writing a great affirmative case. No different. Beating legislation is exactly the same as writing great negative arguments. And debating on the floor of the Senate is pretty much exactly like debate. In fact, the jurisdiction of your committee is a debatable proposition. It's like topicality. So you can expand the jurisdiction of your committee through good argument as well. Now, I would love to go into examples and details, but we don't have all that much time. So I'm going to tell you one thing that Charlie mentioned, and that is that as we moved into the position where Senator Kennedy was going to chair this committee, I hired 2 former national debate tournament champions to do nothing but write blocks for floor argument. When you go to the floor, which means you're actually going to debate the bill and have people vote on it, you're wide open for debate. In fact, in the Senate, not only are you open for debate on what you brought, someone can offer an amendment on any topic they want to your bill. You might be down there debating about whether or not the minimum wage should be raised, and someone can say, well, I have an amendment here, and my amendment is they ought to ban online pornography. You know, and people are scared and they don't want to vote in favor of online pornography, and so they'll stick it on your minimum wage bill, and then all of the telco companies and all of the internet service providers will want to stop your minimum wage bill because that undoes them. Anyway, it's an old trick. So you have to defeat all these negative amendments that could come from anywhere. It was just like debate. I loved it. And with the help of these other 2 guys, Lenny Gale of Dartmouth, by the way, and John Massey of Harvard, the 2 NDT champs I hired, we blocked Senator Kennedy to the gills for floor debate. And Senator Kennedy, who died a little over a year ago, God bless him, got to be a really good debater. And he knew exactly what the sheets were that I gave him were supposed to be like. Tag evidence, tag evidence, tag evidence. And when someone would raise an argument, our goal was not to defeat it. Our goal was to smash it. Our goal was to bury it in multi-point responses. Our goal was to know the footnotes of their studies and humiliate them with it so that people wouldn't want to debate us anymore. Senators are human too. They don't want to go down to the floor and get humiliated because you know the footnotes in their study that take the wind out of their sails and they don't. So often we would say we'd start with a lot of debate at the beginning of a bill and then it would go away. One last set of numbers to share with you. Because we were so ready to debate, because our bills were crafted carefully as affirmative cases that would take out the other side's objections, we were able to control the legislative agenda of the Senate. In the last year of the 100th Congress, Congresses are always in 2 years. The first year, everybody spends doing hearings and working up their bills. The second year, you bring stuff down and you vote on it. The Congress was in session for 87 days. I told you there are 16 committees. The Labor Committee was on the floor passing bills 75 of those days. We were doing 14 times the work of the average committee because we were ready for debate. We liked debate. We invited our enemies to come down and debate, and they would not come much of the time because we were ready for them. Fourth case where debate works in the real world, and this has worked out very, very well for me, is in business. 15% of the debaters in Keel and Maitland's study were high-ranking corporate executives. Now, y'all are in school right now, and you will, when, not if, but when you go to college, you will be surrounded by university professors, for the most part, who often have chosen not to go into profit-making enterprises for a living and sometimes look with disdain on those who have. Let me tell you that that is a disgusting outlook. Now, can business be evil? Of course. So can government. So can the university. Business done right is a beautiful thing. I will tell you this. It is much more open-ended intellectually than the law is. There are far fewer constraints on what you can think about. There's a great deal more creativity involved in business than there is in law. And two, creating valuable goods and services for other people, things that they want so much that they think that they are worth more than the money they gave you in order to get them, is a beautiful thing. And those of you who disagree, please leave your iPods in the waste bin by the door. All of this stuff that business is able to do for us, electricity, transportation, air conditioning, thank God in Houston, and so forth, is the result of profit-seeking business people, and it can be done beautifully. Most business decisions, and here's the debate part of this, almost all business decisions are choices about the use of scarce resources. All choices about the use of scarce resources are resolutions. Should we expand into China? Should we build out and deploy the new software? Should we take the cars off the market before the brakes start failing? Or should we wait until a few people have their brakes fail and then take them off the market? These are debatable propositions. And how do you debate them? Exactly as I said before. Research it, block it, and debate it, and then decide it with a clear head. Let me cite one of the most successful business authors in the world, Jim Collins. He used to be a professor of business at Stanford Business School. He's written probably the most successful business book of the last 20 years called Good to Great. And this is about companies that went from being good companies, decent returns, so on and so forth, but then something happened. And they became great companies for a period of at least 15 years. There are only a handful of examples where this has ever taken place, and Jim researched all of them furiously. And he identified a set of things that those companies did that their competitors, who were often very good companies, did not do. And this is what sets them apart. There are about 5 such things, but I want to cite one of them to you. This is directly from Jim's book. In the companies he studied, the capacity to face brutal facts was absolutely essential. Here's how he describes it. Phrases like loud debate, heated discussions, and healthy conflict peppered the articles and interview transcripts from all the successful companies. They didn't see discussion as a sham process to let people have their say so they could buy into a predetermined decision. The process was much more like a heated scientific debate with people engaged in a search for the best answers. Now that concludes my discussion about the places where debate can benefit you in the real world. But I'm now going to give you 2 big cautions about how debate works in the real world. Not where, but how. One of these calls for significant change. The other calls for things to stay the same. In the real world, there are 2 rules debaters absolutely must follow in order to change the way that you debate. Rule 1, walk, don't sprint. What? Carl Lewis, who was, in 1984, the fastest man alive, was a brilliant sprinter. I had the good luck to see him win his 4th gold medal at the '84 Olympics. Not only was he fast as blazes, it was also beautiful just to watch him run. The guy could move. And a couple of years later, I was watching him do an interview with a sports reporter, and the 2 of them were walking down the street together like this. The camera was in front of them, watching the 2 of them talk. Carl walked. He was the fastest man on the planet. But he did not run when he went down the street with other people. He walked. Debaters must learn to walk, not to sprint. Now, in the most obvious case, this means you have to control the speed with which you speak once you come out into the real world. You will be tempted, if you ever have occasion to speak, to go too quickly. Trust me, get it down to about 120 words a minute and people will follow you fine. But this is the more important point. It's not speed that you have to worry about, it's force that you have to worry about. And what do I mean by force? Most smart people in this world did not debate, okay? Just aren't enough opportunities. But there are a lot of smart people out there who didn't debate. They do not understand the way in which debaters handle arguments and deal with each other, okay? So I'm going to give you an example here, and we need a little role playing to accompany this. All of you are part of the role here. We're going to pretend, and my good friend and faithful assistant, Charlie Chafer, is going to join us here. Charlie gets this chair. There's Charlie. We're going to pretend that we're in a discussion at the United States State Department. Senior staff are trying to decide what should be done about the humanitarian and political crisis in Syria, where a tyrannical regime is killing thousands of its citizens, trying to repress the yearning for political freedom. And I have advanced the argument that the United States should take military action. Charlie, who did not debate, is going to suggest something else we might also consider. All of you are Charlie, okay? So I want you to be in the person of this fine fellow right here. I will be you, debaters, now in the real world. So Charlie is going to contribute this suggestion to the discussion of those of us around the table, which includes his boss, his wife, other people in front of whom he'd rather not be embarrassed.
Well, perhaps we should seek United Nations support to stop human rights violations in Syria to create democratic support for armed action.
Seek UN action on human rights violations to gather democratic support for armed action. The UN, one, they're glacially slow. In Bosnia, 800,000 bodies were dead and buried before anyone in the UN even talked about doing this. Only unilateral action by the United States prevented a bloodbath going on there. And you want to commission a UN discussion of whether we should save lives in Syria? Two, the UN on human rights. Did you know that the UN Human Rights Committee was chaired recently by Libya, which just got overthrown by its own people for the scale of its own human rights violations? Moreover, it can backfire, because often the best way to get rid of a tyrannical regime is to allow them to flee. Let them take off, go somewhere else. The Syrians would probably go to Iran, and then you could turn the country over to their people. But if the UN gets hold of it, then they get charged by the International Criminal Court, where they face life penalties for crimes against humanity. And rather than spend the rest of their lives in a cell in The Hague, they would probably rather have a fight about it and maybe even fight you to the end. Finally, democracy and the UN. First, I don't understand why we even listen to some of these countries. They aren't contributing the troops that would be used in action against them. Why should they have a vote about it? And as for democracy, I assume you mean US style, where we do one person, one vote. The UN does one country, one vote. So the citizens of Tuvalu, and there are only 10,000 of them, get just as many votes as the citizens of China, where there are 1.4 billion voices who do not get to speak any more loudly than the Tuvalunians. I suppose we should just turn the whole thing over to the Tuvalunians and let them decide the future of Syrian freedom. I don't know, Charlie. I think it's been a long time since you got your degree from the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. It might be just as long before the UN ever takes any action. Boom. You're Charlie. You're Charlie. I just did 3 debate-style things. I made all the arguments at once. I reduced an argument to the absurd. That was the Tuvalunian thing. And I made an ad hominem argument. I attacked the speaker himself by insulting his degree. And by the way, he at least got his degree from the School of Foreign Service. Mine is in philosophy from Georgetown, so I'm not particularly qualified to speak on this. How does Charlie feel? Is Charlie angry? Yeah, does Charlie feel a little humiliated? Oh, yeah. Now let me ask you 2 things about what Charlie may or may not want to do in the future. Will Charlie, in the future, want to share ideas and insights with me? Oh, I just lost the ideas and insights? Will Charlie, in the future, want to agree with me and maybe even vote in favor of things I suggest? Probably not. So, oh, I just won the argument and lost a vote. Here's my point. In the real world, get this, inscribe this across the back of your eyeballs. In the real world, your opponent is usually also the judge. You're trying to persuade her or him or them to agree with you. It is very rare that you will encounter a circumstance where there's a third party who's going to decide whether Charlie's argument is better or mine is better. I'm trying to persuade Charlie here. I mean, at the end of the day, you just say, well, that guy's, my goodness, those are great arguments made by a jerk. Y'all were the jerk. Don't get carried away about me. Okay? I think you get the idea. By the way, Charlie and I are professionals. Please do not try this at home. Your parents will get extraordinarily upset if you deal with them argumentatively in this way. Now, let me tell you something else about debate in the real world. This is Rule 2, and it follows from what we just studied. Vote against yourself early and often. What? I thought you were telling me how to succeed in life. I am, in the long run. Vote against yourself early and often. This is what that means. We are debaters. We ought to have a sense of detachment from our arguments. You've seen good arguments, you've seen bad arguments. Heck, you people switch sides every round, right? You don't get attached to one side or the other unless, well, sometimes you get attached, but not during a debate round. An argument is a disembodied thing out there. And the reason that we argue about it is to try and find the best thing out there that can lead us to the best answer possible. David Zarevsky ran the Northwestern University debate program for many years and was for 30 years the chair of the communications department at Northwestern. He has argued, I think persuasively, that debate, get this, is a social and cooperative enterprise that we as people do to find the best answer, unless you think it's all about winning the argument. Larry mentioned earlier a fellow against whom we used to debate, Larry Summers, who went on to become Secretary of Treasury, President of Harvard, and so on and so forth. One of the best things I know about Larry is that I've never met a human being who will more quickly reverse himself in the face of a better argument. Now, he's an extraordinarily smart guy, and he often has the better argument, but when faced with a better one, he will change his position right away and say, okay, that's the better way to go. Let's see how that works out. Let it be said of you that she cared more about the truth than about her own ego. Okay? Now, here's one thing about debate that cannot change. Gave you two things that did need to change. Here's one that cannot. Debate is a skill that works well, but only if you work hard. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, isn't this a lot of work? Are you saying that in all these fields you've been talking about that we have to keep putting in the 10 or 15 or, Jesus, sometimes 30 hours extra every week than our colleagues in order to win? Oh, I'm telling you there's a struggle ahead. Hell yes, I'm telling you there's a lot coming up ahead. But who wants normal? Who wants normal? Who wants mediocre? I know about the schools some of you go to. It is normal to drop out. Are you going to drop out? No. How about you? You going to drop out? You? No. What about the rest of you? No! Absolutely not. Not only are you not dropping out of high school, you're going to college. And when I get here in 15 years, I expect all of you to have different names. Whoop, that got him. What do you mean, different names? Oh, yeah. Oh, I'd like you all to name yourself Tom Rollins. That would be, well, Freudian nightmare of some kind. No, let's not dwell on that. I want you to change your names. Excuse me, son with the red tie. What's your name? Andres. Andres, full name. What's your full name?
Andres Manolos.
Andres Manolos. How about Dr. Andres Manolos? What's your name, ma'am? You. Yeah, what's your name? Say.
Connie Cruz.
Connie Cruz. How about State's Attorney Connie Cruz? Huh? I want all of you to change your names by sticking letters at the end of them. I want the letters MD, JD, MBA, PhD stuck on the ends of your names in 15 years. And yes, that's going to be a lot of work, okay? But normal stinks. Mediocrity is not very interesting. Let me share a life secret with you. Get this. In the long run, excellence is probably less work and is certainly less suffering than mediocrity. I'm going to repeat that on the off chance that one of you will remember it and live by it. In the long run, excellence is probably less work and certainly less suffering than mediocrity. Mediocrity is hard, partly because you have to spend all your time trying to get other people to quit asking you to be more than you are. It's also expensive as you see other people who are pursuing excellence pass you by. It hurts being mediocre. Let me quote Jim Collins again. This is an observation that he made at the end of his study. I believe it is no harder, and he was posing the question, my God, why would anybody want to work so hard as to build a great company? And so he's talking about his research results. He says, I believe it is no harder to build something great than it is to build something good. It might be more statistically rare to reach greatness, but it does not require more suffering than perpetuating mediocrity. Indeed, if some of the companies that were beaten by great companies in our study are any indication, it involves less suffering and perhaps even less work. Now, where should you do such hard work? I want you to pick a field where you want to build or do something that is, in Steve Jobs of Apple's phrase, insanely great. You find that thing. You may not know what it is now. You may think you know what it is now. You may change your mind in 4 years. That's okay too. But you find something where you want to be insanely great, and then you pour into it all your strength, all your power, all your love, everything you learned to debate, and you go get it. Now, I'm going to tell you what that ought to be right now. Right now, make it your goal to become an insanely great debater. Master this skill. Let me give you another reason why you ought to do it, in addition to what it will do for you in your future. I want to share an insight from Bart Giamatti. Bart Giamatti was the president of Yale University and the commissioner of baseball. There's an interesting career. He's dead now, but he's the father of Paul Giamatti. He's a famous actor. You would recognize him if you saw him. He wrote an essay on sport. Now, I've trashed the jocks. Now I'm going to honor the jocks. Part of his argument about why it is we love sports so much is that when we see an athlete perform at the very highest level of excellence, something special happens. They transcend the human. They become nearly angelic in what they are able to do. I think of Franz Klammer winning the gold for Austria in the men's downhill in the '68 Olympics. No, I don't remember it then. It's that they replay it during every Winter Olympics to show you what an unbelievable job of skiing could be done. I think of the Georgetown versus Villanova final round at the NC2A basketball tournament in 1985, where, sadly, Georgetown, heavily favored to win, was beaten by a Villanova team that played out of its mind for every single second of that final round. I saw people do things I didn't know human beings could do for 40 minutes. And I think most recently of the Wimbledon finals in 2008, Nadal versus Federer. The most unbelievable exhibition of tennis brilliance I've ever seen in my life. In fact, most of the commentators who watch it for a living said this is the most unbelievable exhibition of tennis brilliance we've ever seen in our lives. And it went on for 4 hours and 48 minutes. It was astonishing. It was uplifting as a human being just to see what other human beings can do. So a couple of years ago, I'm at the Harvard High School debate tournament. And unfortunately, because we didn't have enough assistant judging and we couldn't buy any, I had to judge 8 hours of debate in a single day. Our old friend, another former Georgetown debater, Dallas Perkins, is the head coach at Harvard, and I begged him, Dallas, I'll do all the judging. Just give me really good rounds. And oh God, he did. For 8 hours, it was like watching that Wimbledon final to me. God, does she see what he did in the 1AR that she could really crush him with? And oh, yes, she did say it. On and on you go. Great debate, to me, is like great sport. And here's my closing argument to you. For those of us with the eyes to see you and the ears to hear you, you are, and have the potential to be, brilliant, verbal, and intellectual athletes. You are brain jocks. And you are at one of Houston's finest tournaments. I want to urge you to use this tournament as the opportunity to begin your race to greatness. Now, I want to wish you good luck at this tournament, all of you, and I want to wish you good luck all of your days, because we are debaters, so we are brothers and sisters. And I've shared a lot about my past because I want much of it to inform your future. I want all your futures to be happy, healthy, prosperous, and tough. Now go out and hunt some trophies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you all for your attention. We wanted to thank Tom once again for coming down and give him another round of applause.
Love trophies.
He's like all of us former debaters, we still flag trophies. Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you